Section 1.
You will hear two women talking about house cleaning. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 3. Listen carefully to the first part of the conversation and answer questions 1 to 3.
Well, Jill, I'm glad you had a nice holiday. We'll have to try it ourselves sometime.
Yes, Kate, you really should. I'll give you a contact number for the hotel we stayed in. Anyway, I must be...
Oh, I know what I meant to ask you. Sorry, it was about a cleaner.
Oh, yes?
Yes, we've been talking about getting somebody to come in and help out. You had a cleaner not long ago, didn't you?
I thought you said having a cleaner was a waste of money, that you'd never pay somebody to do what you can do perfectly well yourself.
Well, yes, maybe. But things have changed. Things are really hectic for Greg at work all of a sudden. He's never home till after 8. I end up doing everything. The house looks like such a mess. I never get time to tidy up before I go out to work, and in the evenings I just about manage to cook and wash up.
Well, you shouldn't be the one doing everything if you're working as well. That's not fair, is it?
I think Greg's just shattered. Oh, to be fair, he's pretty domesticated. We've always pretty much shared the chores. It's just a temporary thing, I think. I hope. We're basically both trying to juggle too much. The last thing we want to do at the weekends is start cleaning. We want to relax a bit.
It's not because all the neighbours have got a cleaner, is it?
You know me too well. I guess there is a bit of that. I feel like the poor relation when I tell them I do all the cleaning myself. They can't believe I fit in so much.
Never worry about what other people think.
No. Anyway, one way or another we need a cleaner. Well, as long as it's not too expensive, that is.
I don't think it's expensive, and it's money well spent. We only stopped having Tricia come in every week because I was off work with the baby, so I could do most of it myself.
So how much is it?
Well, Tricia was £8 an hour. I can't say that's what everyone charges.
That isn't bad, is it? It's less than I thought. Oh, well, I think we can run to £8. How many hours did she do?
4 hours a week.
Well, that sounds about right. Can you give me her number then?
Oh, sorry, no. She's not around anymore. She went back to Wales. I think it was Wales anyway, a couple of months ago.
Oh, no. That's a shame.
Wait a minute, though. We've had some leaflets through the door recently. Let me see if I can find one. I put one here by the phone, I'm sure.
You now have some time to look at questions 4 to 10. Now listen to the rest of the conversation and answer questions 4 to 10.
Ah, yes, here we are. It's a company. They're called Dusters.
Dusters?
Yes, as in people who dust. You have to phone Abby on...
Is that Abby with EY?
No, It's ABBY.
OK.
And it's a local number, 650918.
650918. OK, got it.
They do ironing and can look after your garden too, apparently.
Ironing would be helpful. I loathe ironing. So, do they say how much it is?
Yes, it's £9.50 an hour. That's for all the different services.
£9.50? A bit more expensive then.
They do a spring clean for £45.
So that's one big clean. Do they say how many hours that is?
No, it just says spring clean. I guess it's 5 hours, so it's a bit cheaper than 5 hours of cleaning would be normally.
Yes, probably. That might be a good idea to start off with.
You'll like this too, Kate. They can use organic products if you want them to.
Oh, yes, I'd prefer that. I don't like using strong chemicals. They're so bad for the environment. OK, I'll give them a call. Thanks for that.
That is the end of section 1. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Turn to Section 2. Section 2. You will hear a tour guide talking to a group of visitors at a museum. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 15. Listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 15.
Welcome to the museum. Before we go inside, I'd like to remind you of one or two things. Firstly, you'll be pleased to know that admission is free to all visitors, so explore at your leisure, and if you can't take it all in today, you can come back again and again without any charge at all. Opening hours are from 10 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. most days, but the museum closes a little later on Thursday and Friday evenings. There are new multimedia guides available in 10 languages. They can be picked up from the desk in the covered courtyard for £4.50, and you can have it with you all day, from opening time in the morning until half an hour before closing. But you will need to produce ID. A passport, driver's license or national identity card are all acceptable. These multimedia guides have audio commentary as well as images and an interactive map for easy navigation. They're simple to operate, and you will get a more detailed insight into many of the objects in the various galleries. As a security measure, apart from your camera and a purse, wallet or small handbag, your other belongings such as large bags, coats and umbrellas will have to be left at the cloakroom. Please note that the museum has recently revised the regulations for the size of bags and parcels that it will accept in its cloakrooms. I think the maximum size is 40 by 40 by 50 centimetres with a maximum weight of 8 kilograms. The only exception to this is prams and pushchairs. There is a charge of £1 per item. The main cloakroom is to the left of the main entrance, and there is another one at the north entrance. It may seem obvious, but may I remind you also that you should set your mobile phone to silent or turn it off altogether while you are in the museum, and do not carry or consume any food or drink in the exhibition halls. If you are hungry, there is an excellent restaurant where you can purchase a light lunch or a full meal. If it's just a hot beverage you want, then I can recommend taking a break at the Gallery Cafe.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 16 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 16 to 20.
As we enter the museum from the south by going through the main entrance, as I said before, you'll find the cloakroom immediately on your left, and on your right is the museum shop. They have an outstanding range of postcards and souvenirs in there, and it's well worth a visit, but perhaps best left till you're on your way out. Then you'll know exactly what you want. The big room to the right of the entrance, behind the shop, is the reference library. Straight ahead of you, yes, the huge circular room is the main reading room. If you decide to go in there, please keep noise to a minimum out of respect for the writers and scholars who use it for their research. The reading room is surrounded by what is known as the Great Court. Indeed, it used to be an open courtyard, but you will see that it is now completely covered by a magnificent glass and steel structure. If you walk around the Great Court in a clockwise direction, on the west side, you'll see the entrance to the Long Hall of Ancient Egypt, which has an amazing collection of Egyptian antiquities. The gallery behind the reading room, directly opposite the entrance, is devoted to China and Southeast Asia. Here you'll see Chinese civilization explored chronologically from the Neolithic period through to the 21st century. The restrooms for both men and women are located in the northeast corner of this floor, but don't worry, there are others available on the floors above. Another huge gallery extends along the eastern side of the courtyard, and this is given over to Greece and Rome. The sculptures in this section are absolutely spellbinding. Take your time looking at all the exhibits, and when you're ready to view what's on the next floor, take the magnificent marble staircase by the entrance.
That is the end of section 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turn to Section 3. Section 3. You will hear 3 students, Ben, Jane, and Tom, having a discussion about their Architecture and Design Studies course. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 25. Now listen to the first part of the conversation and answer questions 21 to 25.
So, Tom, did you manage to get all your reading done?
Yes, Ben, I did. What about you, Jane?
Me too, though it took much longer than I thought it would.
Yeah, some of those dissertations are really long, aren't they?
I'm not looking forward to having to write mine.
Well, that's not till next year.
So, shall we compare thoughts about our reading? Let's start with 20th century architecture. I thought it was pretty impressive.
There was quite a bit of detail.
Yeah, all very relevant. I enjoyed the pictures, the diagrams and photos.
They were quite strange. Not what you'd expect to find in a dissertation, but very helpful.
Whereas sometimes I couldn't really follow the arguments.
Yes, a bit of a mixed bag, really. While modern construction was very serious and thorough, wasn't it?
Indeed. Actually, it was rather dense. I didn't find it particularly easy to read either.
The index was excellent, though, so I used that to guide me around.
I still think it was a bit high level. I certainly wouldn't have wanted to try and cope with it in the first year.
No. That's not who it's aimed at, of course. What about steel, glass and concrete? Not the world's most interesting title, of course.
Again, the index was helpful, though I think we could have done with more photos. There weren't really enough to support what he was saying in places.
Yeah. But what he was saying was easy to follow, wasn't it? He takes you through step by step.
It was hard to believe it had been translated. Seemed very natural.
Actually, it was better written than the next one, The Space We Make.
But we're supposed to be thinking about architectural ideas, not being literary critics. I like that one.
Really? I just didn't think it covered the whole situation.
It didn't put the question of housing into the context of the time.
You mean how in the 50s economic austerity limited the finances available while a growing population needed housing quickly?
Exactly.
Again, I think you're asking too much of these dissertations.
Perhaps you're right. Well, I did like change and tradition anyway. Very focused.
Yes, although I did think it was oddly arranged in some ways. When you went to the index to track something down, you couldn't necessarily find what you wanted.
I know what you mean. But I have to say, I'd be very proud if I'd written any of these.
True.
And you will next year.
Now you have some time to look at questions 26 to 30. Now listen to the rest of the conversation and answer questions 26 to 30.
Never mind next year. It's this year that's the problem. I'm never going to get this assignment done.
Yes, you are.
Come on, let's make a plan for you.
Please. I'm just not sure where to go from here. I could look at city plans, study the layout of housing developments.
I think you need a closer focus. The approach to small houses won't necessarily tell you what you want to know. You'd be better to concentrate on large private houses. Study the drawings of those.
OK. Though I don't know how much useful detail I'll be able to get from the kinds of plans that are easily available from that period.
It's true, they can be limited. But what you could do as a next stage is go onto the web. There's loads of useful stuff there.
More detailed plans, you mean?
Well, I was thinking more of illustrations, that kind of thing. Do a search for window designs. I'm sure you'll find some good ones.
I agree. And not just online. See what you do find there, and then, for your next step, check both campus libraries. I think you'll be able to get hold of books which will give you further information. And you need to know more about typical furniture of the time.
This is all very helpful. Thanks, guys. I'm beginning to think I should be able to get something done for Dr. Forbes after all. At least I can see I'll be in a position to tell him the section headings.
Well, a bit more than that would be better. Put your outline plan together and give him that to look at.
Yes. But I'll still need to keep reading, won't I?
Yeah. Once Dr. Forbes has okayed what you've done at that point, you could then go and see Dr. Gray. He's very approachable, and I'm sure he'd be happy to provide you with further references, and then you could take it from there.
That'd be really useful. Well, thanks again. Let me get you both another coffee.
That is the end of Section 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turn to Section 4. Section 4. You will hear a talk on the research of architecture. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
Welcome, class, to your very first lecture in this series on architecture, conducted by myself, Dr. Torben Dahl. Today we will be looking into the relationship between climate and architecture, where I will be giving you a critical overview of the main climate influences that shape the design of buildings. Throughout this lecture series, we will be looking at the latest research into climatic design carried out by experts in the field, in addition to case studies and examples drawn from modernist practice, both in cities and rural areas. Now, acid rain is one of the climatic elements with the most devastating effects on our architecture. The chemicals in acid rain can cause paint to peel, corrosion of steel structures such as bridges, and erosion of stone statues. Since the 1970s, our government has been making great effort to reduce the release of these chemicals into the atmosphere, with positive results. Private organizations have also been raising awareness and funds, and recently received a huge donation from the bank. It is interesting to look at the studies that have been carried out into the effects of acid rain at varying altitudes. Research has shown that there are lower levels of acid in the damaging pollutants at higher altitudes, meaning that skyscrapers are much less vulnerable to the negative effects, as they are exposed to acid rain with far lower levels of damaging pollutants. Recently, the ALTA project was founded to carry out further research into acid rain. This project is directed towards studying the effects of acid rain on old, traditional buildings of stone construction that are vulnerable to damage caused by acid rain. Masonry is particularly vulnerable as it is easily corroded and weakened by the acidic chemicals. It is imperative that we protect these buildings, as they are valuable examples of our history and culture. Pollution is one of the main sources of concern in the present day. The construction industry contributes considerably as a source of pollution in its day-to-day processes of creating building materials such as concrete and glass. However, more new sustainable methods are being developed to counter this. A recent case study for this is Sky Tower, whose windows have been made from recycled glass to prevent pollution from the glass-making process. Water is the most problematic element to be considered in construction. It is imperative that construction elements, such as the insulation, are fitted into the building in dry weather to prevent it from getting wet. This makes winter an undesirable season for construction, as the heavy rainfall can have adverse effects on the building. Another climate type that has an enormous effect on buildings is humidity. Constructions made of steel and stone are largely unaffected by humidity. However, it can have a serious effect on wooden constructions if the timber has not been correctly treated. Moisture from the air can condense in the grain of the wood, which then swells and shrinks in proportion to the magnitude of change in its moisture content. This variation in size can have disastrous consequences. In areas of the world that are prone to earthquakes, certain design and environmental conditions are preferable for protecting buildings in the event of a tremor. Engineers have come up with numerous building procedures to help minimize shaking in buildings. For example, tall buildings have height restrictions and counterweights, and multi-story buildings have reinforced floors and walls. Ground conditions are a cause for worry in many constructions, as often the soil is of the wrong density to protect the foundations. Luckily, technology has now been developed that can help to minimize damage by earthquakes. Seismic sensors can give prior warning when an earthquake is about to happen, so that preparations can be made to protect both the people and the buildings from harm. The movement of building structures can now also be measured and monitored over time by architects. It has been expressed by architects within the design community that it would be valuable to be given special courses for designing buildings within earthquake zones. Guidelines are also expected to be produced by the government in the near future that will give architects a universal checklist to follow. That wraps up the lecture for today. Please remember that attendance is mandatory.
That is the end of section 4. You now have half a minute to check your answers. That is the end of the listening test. In the IELTS test, you will now have 10 minutes to transfer your answers to the answer sheet.